My name is Claire Thompson. I'm 31 years old. For most of my life, I've been the daughter who stayed quiet, the one who filled the spaces no one noticed, while my older sister Anna took the spotlight with ease. That night, we gathered at my parents' oak dining table, polished until it gleamed beneath the chandelier. The room looked warm and elegant, but to me it felt heavy, almost suffocating. My father poured wine into crystal glasses and lifted his own high. To Anna, the youngest attorney in her firm's history to win such a remarkable case, he declared, his voice proud, his eyes shining. My mother's face glowed as she leaned across the table to squeeze Anna's hand. "We always knew you were destined for greatness," she said. Anna gave a practiced, modest smile, tilting her head just so, her golden hair catching the light. I sat in my navy dress, too expensive for me, but I had worn it like armor. My hands smoothed the fabric as I gathered courage. I wanted to be seen, even if only for a moment. "At work," I began softly, "I helped design a new compliance system but Mom didn't even glance at me." Her voice cut across mine, sharp with pride for Anna. "Did you tell them what the judge said afterward?" My words shrank to nothing. I reached for my water glass, forcing a small sip. And then it came. The blow I never saw coming. My mother's fork clicked softly against her plate as she looked directly at me. "Claire, you're not even half the woman your sister is." Silence filled the room. Even the ticking clock on the mantel seemed to stop. My chest tightened, heat rising in my face as my fingers trembled around the glass. If you've ever felt invisible at your own family's table, you know how those words stay long after the plates are cleared. And if you understand that kind of pain, please like this video and subscribe, so more family stories like this one can be told, stories too many of us carry quietly in our hearts. I swallowed hard. 4 years of sacrifice, 4 years of being overlooked pressed against me all at once. And before I could stop myself, my voice broke through the silence, quiet but steady. "Then let her pay the mortgage for this house." Dad's fork slipped from his hand, clattering against porcelain. Anna froze mid-smile. My mother's face drained of color. And just like that, the air in the room shifted, heavy with secrets I could no longer keep hidden. After those words hung in the dining room, "You're not even half the woman your sister is," I couldn't stop my mind from racing backward. The memory came sharp and clear, like the sound of a phone ringing in the middle of the night. I was 27, drifting into sleep in my small apartment when the call came. My mother's voice cracked through the receiver. "Claire, honey, I didn't know who else to call. We're going to lose the house." Her words tumbled out between sobs about missed payments, foreclosure, and Dad's struggling business. I sat up in bed staring at the glow of my laptop as I opened my bank account. The savings I had built, 3 years of skipped dinners out, brown bag lunches, and overtime shifts, glowed on the screen. It was meant for a down payment on my first condo, maybe even for the MBA I'd been accepted to. "How much?" I asked, though my throat felt tight. "Just $2,500 to stop the foreclosure process," Mom whispered. "Just this once. Your father is mortified. We'll pay you back as soon as things turn around." I clicked transfer. The numbers on my screen fell like an elevator in free fall. "Thank you, sweetheart," Mom breathed, her tears suddenly gone, her voice rinsed clean with relief. Dad came on the line briefly, his tone forced but firm. "Won't happen again, Claire Bear." Just a rough patch. But it did happen again. 3 weeks later, another call. This time, $1,200. A month later, $1,800. By the 6th month, I'd stopped asking why. I simply set up an automatic transfer, $1,500 every month, straight to their mortgage company. The sacrifices began to stack higher than the bills. I deferred my MBA for the second time. "Financial circumstances," I wrote on the form, knowing the university would only hold my spot for 1 more year. I watched a downtown condo, perfectly within my reach, slip away as my savings evaporated. While I microwaved ramen in my break room, Mom posted photos from a dinner at Marcello's, the finest Italian restaurant in town. Dad's new golf clubs leaned against the dining room wall in the background of another picture. "Blessed?" the caption read. I stopped joining friends for weekend trips. I stopped accepting dinner invitations. Every month, the transfer left me with just enough for rent, groceries, and a bus pass. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was love. But deep down, I knew I was setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. Sometimes I'd scroll through old photos, my childhood bedroom with the window seat, the oak tree out front that I fell from when I was 8. Those memories convinced me I couldn't let the house go. It wasn't just a building. It was where we celebrated Christmas, where Dad carved turkeys, where Mom lit candles at the table. That was what I thought I was saving. But the reality grew clearer each month. They weren't just surviving, they were living comfortably while I was stuck in place. My credit card applications were rejected, my friends stopped asking me along because I always said no, and opportunities slipped through my fingers like water. And yet I stayed silent. Every time my mother's number appeared on my phone, my chest tightened. Every time Dad said, "Just a little longer," I believed him. 4 years slipped by in this fog of sacrifice, until that dinner table, until those words, "Not even half the woman your sister is." I had carried their weight quietly. But in that moment, I felt every dollar, every dream, every ounce of myself I had poured into them pressing against my ribs, begging to break free. The night after that dinner, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying my mother's words over and over. But what I couldn't have imagined was how much deeper the betrayal went. It started with a message from a friend. "Claire, have you seen this?" Attached was a photo. I opened it slowly, not knowing that the ground beneath me was about to shift. On my phone screen appeared a wide banner stretched across the front of my parents' Tudor-style house. Bold red letters against white fabric shouted to the entire neighborhood, "Congratulations, Anna, for saving the family home." The breath caught in my throat. I had to sit down, my knees trembling under me. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stared at the words, unblinking, as though if I looked long enough, the truth might rewrite itself. 4 years, $84,000. My down payment, my MBA, my future, erased in an instant, and in its place stood a lie. That was the second betrayal. I wanted to believe maybe she didn't know, maybe she thought Mom and Dad were the ones paying the mortgage. But as the weeks went on, the lie grew bigger. At church, people congratulated Anna. At family gatherings, relatives praised her generosity. I stood in the background, invisible as always, while my sister soaked in the admiration. I confronted her once, quietly, outside a family brunch. "Anna, do you know who's really been paying?" I asked, my voice shaking. She looked at me, hesitation flickering in her eyes before she answered. "Mom and Dad said you were struggling. They told me they were helping you. I didn't want to make things harder by asking questions." Her words stung almost as much as silence. She hadn't wanted to know the truth. It was easier for her to bask in the glow of being the good daughter than to face what was really happening. That night, I sat in my apartment scrolling through years of transactions. Each payment stared back at me like a scar. My fingers hovered over the cancel button for the automatic transfer. For the first time, I pressed it. When the next morning came, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Dad's voice on voicemail was sharp, almost furious. "What you did last night was inexcusable. We've supported you your entire life, and this is how you repay us?" I deleted the message. Mom's calls followed, tearful, begging, demanding. Then came the texts from extended family, each one echoing the same refrain. Family comes first. But I knew what they really meant. You come last, Claire. The banner, the lie, the silence, it all settled into my bones. I wasn't just overlooked anymore. I was erased. My sister had been given my sacrifice as a crown, and she wore it willingly. For days, I walked through life in a daze. At work, my colleagues congratulated me on a project, but their voices sounded far away. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, wondering how long I had been living as a ghost in my own family. One evening, my friend Jessica invited me for coffee. She listened as I poured out the entire story, the phone calls, the transfers, the banner, the silence. When I finally stopped, she set her mug down firmly. "Claire, this isn't love. This is exploitation. And the worst part? They've convinced you to think it's normal." Her words cracked something inside me. For the first time, I saw it clearly. My parents hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my worth. And Anna, whether by choice or by cowardice, had gone along with it. The more I thought about it, the more the anger burned. My whole life, I had been the one who made myself small, who gave up pieces of my future to keep the peace. But peace built on lies isn't peace at all. So when the invitation arrived, a formal dinner to honor Anna's sacrifice, I knew what I had to do. The email glowed on my screen, its cursive font proclaiming, "Join us in celebrating Anna's selfless dedication to family values." I stared at it for a long time, my jaw tight. Then I opened my laptop, gathered every bank statement, every text, every email, and saved them into a folder labeled simply, "The Truth." For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of confrontation. I was ready. If they wanted to celebrate a lie, then I would bring the truth into the light. The evening of the dinner came colder than I expected, a thin wind cutting through my coat as I approached the familiar house. Lights glowed from every window. Cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street. From outside, I could already hear the hum of voices and the faint strains of classical music, my father's preferred soundtrack for important occasions. I clutched the leather folder under my arm, heavy with 4 years of records, and steadied myself. For 31 years, I had entered this house as the overlooked daughter. Tonight, I was stepping inside as something else. The living room had been transformed into a banquet hall. Tables draped in white cloths overflowed with catered dishes. Bouquets of lilies and roses filled the air with perfume. A projector screen displayed a slideshow titled, "The Anderson Family Legacy of Sacrifice." Anna stood near the front, radiant in a crimson dress, her smile soft but triumphant. Guests surrounded her, offering congratulations. "Such devotion," I overheard one cousin say. "She's truly saved this family." My mother spotted me first. Her champagne glass paused mid-air, her voice overly bright. "Claire!" "What a surprise. We weren't sure if your schedule would allow you to join us." Dad turned, his practiced smile faltering as his eyes landed on the folder under my arm. "Pumpkin," he said, spreading his arms as if nothing were wrong. "Come in. We were just about to toast your sister's incredible generosity." The room stilled as I walked forward, each step echoing louder than the music. I placed my folder on the side table and turned to the projector. "May I add something to the presentation?" My voice carried farther than I intended, cutting through the chatter. Dad hesitated, then nodded with the confidence of a man who believed he still controlled the story. "Of course. Our younger daughter wants to honor her sister too. How wonderful." I connected my laptop. The slideshow flickered, then vanished. On the screen appeared a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, transaction notes, mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance. "What is this?" Mom's voice cracked, her smile strained. "The truth," I said simply. Gasps rippled through the room. Aunts, uncles, neighbors leaned forward, squinting. The numbers glowed, undeniable in their precision. Dad's face flushed crimson. "Stop this at once." "You're humiliating us." I met his eyes. "If the truth humiliates you, that's not my fault." I clicked to the next slide. Text messages enlarged across the screen. "Just this once, Claire. We'll pay you back soon. Family comes first." Each word echoed like a hammer against the carefully built facade. My mother rushed forward, her hand outstretched. "This isn't appropriate dinner conversation." I stepped back. "Neither is lying to your entire community." The room murmured. My Aunt Judith pressed a hand to her mouth. Cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Anna moved then, stepping closer, her voice tight. "Claire, why are you doing this? You're making things worse. This isn't the place." Her words struck sharper than I expected, slicing through what little trust I had left. The second betrayal, alive in front of everyone. I turned to her, my voice shaking but strong. "Worse? Anna, for 4 years I've paid the mortgage. $84,000. While you bought condos, while you were praised for being the perfect daughter, I was the one keeping this house standing. And you knew enough to ask questions. But you chose silence." Her face blanched, her lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. The next slide filled the screen. Credit card bills, golf clubs, restaurant tabs, weekend getaways, all while my account bled dry. Guests whispered. An uncle shook his head. A neighbor muttered, "All this time." Mom's tears spilled freely now. "You're killing us with this betrayal." I steadied my voice, the anger burning clean. "No, I am stopping the betrayal of myself." For a long moment no one spoke. The slideshow glowed behind me, casting harsh light on the lies that had once seemed so untouchable. Then Aunt Judith, Dad's eldest sister, stood slowly from her chair. For decades she had defended my parents, excusing every slight, smoothing over every scandal, but this time her voice carried a different weight. "It's about time someone told the truth in this family." She began to clap, slow, deliberate, echoing in the silence. 2 cousins joined, then a neighbor. The sound grew, awkward at first, then steady. My father's jaw tightened, my mother covered her face, Anna stood frozen beside me. And I, after years of invisibility, stood at the center of the room, no longer half of anything. The clapping faded into an uneasy silence, leaving the weight of my words hanging in the air. The slideshow still glowed on the projector screen, frozen on a slide that showed 4 years of transfers, month after month, dollar after dollar. No one moved. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then came the whispers. A cousin leaned toward another, murmuring, "All this time? It was Claire?" A neighbor shook his head slowly. "I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen the numbers." My father's face was hard, jaw tight, his eyes narrowed as if he could will me into silence. My mother wept into a crumpled napkin, her shoulders shaking. And Anna. She just stood there, pale and rigid, her crimson dress like a scarlet flag in the middle of the storm. I felt my own chest rising and falling, each breath sharp with adrenaline. For years my voice had been buried under their pride, their lies, their comparisons. Tonight it rang through every corner of the room. Finally, Anna spoke. Her voice cracked, thin and uncertain. "Claire, I didn't know it was all you. I thought..." She faltered, eyes darting between me and our parents. "I thought they were the ones paying. I didn't want to question it. Her words trailed off into a silence that said more than her apology ever could. She hadn't wanted to know. She had allowed the lie because it benefited her. I looked at her steadily, my heart twisting. "You didn't have to believe the lie, Anna." "But you did. You wore it like a crown." She flinched as if struck. Around us, relatives shifted in their chairs, the weight of decades of family silence suddenly visible. My father finally broke, his voice like gravel. "This little show of yours has humiliated us. In front of family, friends, neighbors, you've shamed this household." I turned to him, my voice calm but firm. "No, I didn't shame this household. You did. You shamed it the moment you took my sacrifices and handed them to Anna like trophies." Gasps rippled again. My mother dropped her napkin, her tear-streaked face contorted with a mix of anger and sorrow. "After everything we've done for you, Claire, you turn on us like this?" I felt the familiar sting of guilt rise in me, but only for a moment. I had carried that guilt for too long. Now it dissolved, replaced with clarity. "You didn't raise me to be strong," I said, my voice trembling but sure. "You raised me to be silent. To give and give until nothing was left. Tonight, I choose not to be silent anymore." The room hushed. For the first time, no one dared interrupt me. My Aunt Judith stepped forward, her hand light on my shoulder. "She's right," she said, her voice steady. "We've all known something was wrong for years. We just didn't want to see it. But Claire, tonight you've made us see." Tears blurred my vision. For so long, I had been invisible. Now someone finally saw me. Anna's lips trembled. "Claire, I'm sorry. I should have said something. I should have asked questions. I should have stood up for you, but her words felt late, like rain after the fire has already consumed the forest." I nodded, but my heart remained guarded. Dad moved closer, his voice rising. "If you walk out now, don't think you're part of this family anymore. You're abandoning us." I straightened, clutching the folder against my chest like a shield. "No, Dad. I'm not abandoning you. I'm abandoning the version of myself that you used. I won't be your bank anymore. I won't be your invisible daughter." Mom sobbed louder. Anna covered her mouth with her hand. The guests sat frozen, unsure of where to look. For the first time in my life, I didn't care. I turned toward the door. Each step felt lighter, like setting down a stone I had carried for miles. My father's voice chased me, full of fury, but I didn't stop. My mother's tears echoed behind me, but they no longer held me captive. When I reached the door, I looked back once. The house that had taken so much from me, the people who had drained me dry, it all looked smaller, like a stage where the actors were still performing the same tired script. "I'm done," I said quietly, more to myself than to them, and then I stepped out into the cold night air. The wind stung my cheeks, but it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their burdens. The night sky stretched wide above me, and with each breath, I felt the weight slip away. Behind me, the music had stopped. The party was over. But for me, something new was just beginning. The weeks after that dinner felt like waking up from a long, heavy sleep. At first, I was raw. My chest ached from words I could not take back, from truths I could not unsee. But slowly, something shifted. Silence no longer felt like abandonment. It began to feel like peace. At work, I poured myself into my projects. Within months, the compliance system I had designed was recognized across the company. My boss looked at me one morning and said, "Claire, your leadership has changed everything for this team." For the first time in years, I believed him. Respect had finally replaced invisibility. I moved into a small apartment, nothing grand but bright and mine. Each morning, I brewed coffee without the old fear of checking my bank app. I joined a cooking class at the community center, laughed with neighbors I once would have passed by. On weekends, I hiked mountain trails with new friends, the wide sky above reminding me how small family drama looked compared to the Rockies. Anna reached out more than once. Her messages came careful, almost hesitant. "I should have spoken up, Claire. I'm sorry I didn't protect you." Part of me softened at her words, but part of me stayed guarded. Silence is its own form of betrayal, and hers had lasted too long. Still, I didn't shut her out. Forgiveness, if it comes, will come slowly, like spring thaw after a hard winter. My parents, though, never changed. Their calls turned to voicemails thick with guilt and blame. Relatives carried messages. "Your mother says she's heartbroken. Your father says you've abandoned the family." I listened, then let the words pass through me like wind. Their burdens no longer belonged to me. One evening, I sat on my balcony as the sun slipped low, painting the sky orange and violet. I opened my journal and wrote the words I had come to understand. Boundaries are not betrayal, they are survival. For so long, I thought love meant giving until I had nothing left. But now I see love without respect isn't love at all, and maybe that's why I wanted to tell this story, because I know I'm not the only one who's felt unseen at their own table or sacrificed until they were hollow. If hearing this makes you nod quietly, makes you feel less alone, then I hope you'll stay. I share these family stories because they matter, because they tell us we're not invisible after all. And if you'd like to keep walking through stories like this with me, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe. Not just for me, but so that more voices like mine, and maybe like yours, can be heard. That night, I closed my journal and leaned back, the cool evening air filling my lungs. For the first time in years, the weight had lifted. Endings, I realized, aren't always failures. Sometimes they're the first step toward freedom.